and he became the love of your life. He became my husband, and he became the love of my life. And he became the one who donated one of his kidneys to you. He eventually saved my life by giving me one of his kidneys. No cameras were rolling, no stage lights, no backup dancers or sequins, just a quiet moment. Years in the making that no one saw coming. After Tina Turner's death, the world mourned the queen of rock and roll, replaying her triumphs, her tragedies, her unforgettable voice. But as headlines faded, one voice emerged that hadn't yet been heard, the one closest to her heart. What he shared wasn't a tribute or a press release. It was something else entirely, something personal. And it caught even her longtime fans off guard. What did Tina leave behind that no one expected? And why is now the moment he chose to speak, a childhood marked by abandonment and survival? Tina Turner entered childhood already burdened by instability and emotional turmoil. Her early life was marked by a volatile and strained relationship between her parents, Zelma and Floyd Bullock, which created a tense and unpredictable home environment. When Tina was just 11 years old, her mother abruptly fled the household in an effort to escape her abusive husband, leaving Tina behind without warning or explanation. Not long after, her father remarried and also left, effectively abandoning her and placing her in the care of her strict religious grandparents. The sudden loss of both parents, first emotionally, then physically, left a deep and lasting impact. Tina often reflected on this period of her life with a profound sense of rejection, later revealing in interviews and memoirs that she felt unwanted, unloved, and forgotten by the very people meant to protect her. It was a wound that never fully healed, and one that shaped how she viewed herself and her worth well into adulthood. Life with her grandparents provided little comfort. Tina's paternal grandparents, both devout members of the Baptist Church, enforced a strict disciplinary household that emphasized religious routine over emotional support. Tina was expected to perform household chores and attend church regularly. And although she did find an early outlet in gospel music, the emotional toll of isolation and loss hung heavy. Memories of picking cotton as a child and navigating a fractured family structure added to the sense of hardship. It's telling that Tina later admitted she couldn't recall feeling nurtured or secure during these early years, and her childhood became a formative crucible, teaching her survival long before she ever found success. Misery seemed to persist during the tender years of adolescence. After a brief meeting with her mother in St. Louis, Tina lost one of the few people who would stay unwavering in her life, her maternal grandmother. At that moment, she also lost her half-sister, who died in a car wreck, adding another layer to her sense of emotional solitariness. Those experiences created deep emotional scars, but they also laid the foundations for her endurance. The teenage years of Tina as a domestic servant in white houses of Tennessee exposed her to the remarkable societal splinters. She came to know very deep yet different realities, strengthened her value for injustice. Much has been discussed around Tina in her later metamorphosis into a global idol. But not much gets said of the girl so quickly formed by abandonment and silence. How much would early treachery, from those who were supposed to love her, harm? Her tolerability for the relationship she would later experience with Ike Turner was that first conditioning. The feeling of being far removed from and powerless in her life, going to be the psychological foundation for her many years, Boaz without ever leaving that abuse. She became a symbol of survival and strength in the end. But her earlier years could tell you a different, somewhat darker story. One about a girl who learned to suffer long before she got around to learning how to sing. But before the world knew her name, one unexpected moment in a nightclub would flip the trajectory of her entire life. From church choir to queen of the stage, Tina Turner's metamorphosis from anime Bullock to the explosive performer known around the world didn't happen overnight. It was forged through a blend of raw talent, fearlessness, and fateful timing. After relocating to St. Louis in her teens, Anna Mae was drawn to the vibrant rhythm and blues scene that pulsed through the city's nightclubs. It was in one of these venues, the Manhattan Club, where she encountered Ike Turner and his band, Kings of Rhythm. She was captivated by their performance and boldly asked to sing. That impromptu moment would change everything. Her voice, unpolished but emotionally potent, impressed Ike so much that he invited her to join the band. It wasn't long before he rechristened her Tina Turner, giving birth to a new persona that he could mold and control. The name Tina wasn't just a stage identity. It was part of a calculated move by Ike, who even trademarked it to ensure she couldn't perform under it if she ever left him. From the outset, her rise was intertwined with control and manipulation. Yet on stage, Tina erupted with uncontainable energy, a contrast to her offstage self, who was still unsure of her worth. Her performances were electric, wild, passionate, and utterly magnetic. Audiences were mesmerized by her commanding stage presence and gravelly voice. And even in those early days, it was clear that she had something rare, something no amount of industry grooming could manufacture. Their act quickly became the Ike and Tina Turner Revue, a frenzied, high-energy affair that crossed genres, eventually becoming the toast of the R&B circuit. Tina's hard-driving dancing and soul-lifting vocals quickly became the public face of the group, eclipsing Ike in popularity. However, even in this ascendancy, she was still bound to him, both artistically and contractually. Ike took care of everything behind the scenes, arrangement and business, while Tina lit up every performance. Was this her way of screaming out in the silence of her private life? Was the stage her only real territory? In any event, Tina was growing more extravagant than the act. The star was on the verge of breaking away, even if she didn't realize it. Her metamorphosis into Tina Turner was more than a marketing strategy. It was an emotional mask and survival technique. For a teenage black woman from a broken home, the stage represented everything she had never known: power, prestige, and dominion over an audience. But the greater her fame grew, the lesser the connection between the woman and her image. Was Tina ever truly allowed to be Anna Mae again? Or did the fame take away anything she had that consisted of being Anna Mae? These questions wash over the reflection of her origin story. Story of reinvention, yes, but also of a woman trying to protect the last bits of herself before stepping into the light. Behind the music, the Ike and Tina Turner Revue was one of the most electrifying acts of the 1960s and early 1970s, a spectacle of soul, grit, and unrelenting rhythm. On stage, the duo was magnetic. Tina commanded attention with her kinetic movements, raspy vocals, and undeniable charisma, while Ike directed the music with precision and force. They toured relentlessly, headlining shows across the U.S. and Europe, and even opened for the Rolling Stones. Audiences were enamored by their chemistry and energy, never suspecting that behind the scenes the dynamic was far from equal. What looked like musical synergy was, in truth, a carefully constructed illusion masking deep dysfunction. Privately, their relationship was defined by control, coercion, and violence. Tina later revealed that even as the spotlight burned brightly, she was suffering in silence. The marriage, which began in 1962, was marred by repeated abuse, both physical and psychological. Tina was beaten, isolated, and manipulated while being paraded in front of crowds as half of a glamorous power duo. Ike's grip over every aspect of their partnership, from finances to branding, left Tina with little personal or creative freedom. Could it be that the very performances that made them famous were also a form of escape for Tina? A place where she could momentarily reclaim her body and voice? This contradiction between public image and private torment became a cruel duality in Tina's life. As the Revue gained commercial success With hits like Proud Mary and River Deep Mountain High, Tina was increasingly being hailed as a trailblazing performer. Yet off-stage, she lived in fear. The glittering costumes and high-octane dancing often disguised the bruises and exhaustion she carried. Did the audience ever see beyond the sequins and sweat? Or did fame and spectacle provide the perfect cover for a nightmare playing out just beyond the stage curtain? Over time, the emotional and physical toll began to eclipse the accolades. While Ike was credited with shaping Tina's career, her artistry and resilience were what truly sustained it. The revue's success came at a staggering cost, and Tina's transformation from muse to martyr wasn't lost on those close to her. Even years later, when Tina shared the reality of their relationship, many struggled to reconcile the violence with the image they had once adored. But perhaps that was the most haunting truth. The world had been cheering for a performance that was, in part, a cry for help. Bold stand against domestic abuse. In 1981, Tina Turner made a decision that would ripple far beyond the pages of a magazine. She broke her silence. In an interview with People, she revealed for the first time the full extent of the abuse she endured during her marriage to Ike Turner. At a time when domestic violence was still largely hidden and dismissed in public discourse, Tina's raw and unfiltered account shocked readers. The beatings, the humiliation, the control. She described Ike throwing scalding coffee on her, forcing her to watch live, intimate shows, and physically assaulting her repeatedly, even during pregnancy. Her bravery in sharing such personal trauma challenged a culture that too often ignored or blamed victims, especially high-profile women of color. This act of disclosure was more than a personal release. It was a cultural reckoning. Turner's words helped shift the narrative around domestic abuse, particularly in the entertainment industry, where glamour and fame often silenced pain. According to Dr. Lenore Walker, a pioneer in domestic violence psychology, Tina's testimony gave credibility to survivors everywhere. It signaled to courts, lawmakers, and the public that abuse was not confined to the impoverished or powerless. If a woman as iconic as Tina Turner could be brutalized and manipulated, it forced society to confront uncomfortable truths about who could be a victim and who could be an abuser. But speaking out came with a cost. Tina later revealed that she feared professional backlash and public doubt. Would audiences still see her as powerful or only as a victim? Would Ike retaliate? Despite these fears, her decision to go public was a turning point, not just for her personal healing, but for a generation of women watching. In interviews that followed, she remained poised, refusing to be baited into reliving the trauma for spectacle. One such moment came in 1993 when an interviewer attempted to provoke a reaction by playing Ike's voice. Tina simply responded, "I have nothing to say." It was a masterclass in dignity, choosing silence not as submission, but as self-preservation. Her revelations would ultimately transcend journalism and be immortalized in her 1986 memoir, I, Tina, later adapted into the critically acclaimed film, What's Love Got to Do with It? Yet even as her story reached the big screen and the Broadway stage, Turner expressed ambivalence about being forever tied to her trauma. Still, she recognized the impact her voice had. In later years, she reflected on how her decision to speak out empowered other women to do the same. Her silence had protected her once, but her voice had liberated millions. In the end, Tina Turner didn't just break the silence. She shattered a societal taboo and rewrote the rules for what survival and strength could look like, rebuilding her life from scratch. When Tina Turner finally walked away from Ike in 1976, she had nothing but her name and a handful of change in her pocket. The decision to leave wasn't just a personal milestone. It was a leap into uncertainty with no safety net. During the divorce, she famously asked for no alimony, no property, and no royalties. All she wanted was to keep the stage name Tina Turner. That name, though burdened with trauma, was her one lifeline. What followed was a period of deep instability. She lived off food stamps, cleaned houses, and slept on the couches of friends and acquaintances. For a global star, it was a dramatic fall, but also the first step toward reclaiming her life on her own terms. Despite the humiliation of her circumstances, Tina refused to give up. She took any gig she could get, playing Las Vegas lounges, appearing on variety shows, and even doing commercials just to survive. These performances were far from glamorous, but they kept her afloat. Many in the industry dismissed her as a relic of the past, or worse, as someone forever tied to Ike's legacy. Could she ever break free from that shadow? Would audiences accept her as a solo act rather than one half of a broken duo? These were the questions she faced as she struggled to piece together a second act, this time without compromise. Behind the scenes, Tina worked tirelessly to reinvent her image and sound. She surrounded herself with new collaborators, pushed her vocal boundaries, and experimented with rock and pop influences, genres she had long admired but rarely been allowed to explore. Her determination wasn't fueled by revenge, but by a quiet, burning desire to be heard on her own terms. There was a sense of urgency. She wasn't just fighting for a comeback. She was fighting to prove she existed beyond the abuse, beyond the headlines, beyond the pain. Would the world be willing to listen? The years between leaving Ike and releasing Private Dancer in 1984 were filled with hardship, but they also laid the foundation for one of the most remarkable reinventions in music history. Tina's refusal to be defined by her past was radical for its time, especially in an industry that often defines women by the men they leave behind. Her journey wasn't glamorous, but it was courageous. She didn't just rebuild a career, she built a new version of herself, fearless, self-made, and more powerful than ever. And in doing so, she offered proof to every survivor that starting over isn't weakness, it's strength. Just when the world thought she had reached her limit, Tina unleashed a comeback that no one saw coming. The Private Dancer phenomenon. By the time Private Dancer was released in 1984, Tina Turner had already survived what many wouldn't: abuse, bankruptcy, and being written off by an industry she had once helped energize. But rather than return quietly or nostalgically, Tina staged a comeback so bold it redefined her legacy entirely. Private Dancer wasn't just a solo debut, it was a reinvention. Backed by a modern production team, the album fused pop, rock, and soul in a way that felt both timeless and ahead of its time. Its lead single, What's Love Got to Do With It, reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and earned Tina 3 Grammy Awards, including Record of the Year. At 44, she was older than most female pop stars, being pushed by major labels, and yet she was just getting started. The success of Private Dancer shocked critics and the public alike, not because Tina lacked talent, but because the industry had largely decided her time had passed. In a youth-obsessed business, she shattered expectations with spiky hair, a leather mini-skirt, and her trademark gravel-edged vocals. She didn't just return, she stormed the gates. The album went on to sell over 10 million copies globally, transforming her from a nostalgic name into an international icon. Was this Tina's ultimate act of defiance? A reclamation of everything she'd been told she couldn't be: powerful, relevant, and in control? The Private Dancer era also marked a stylistic and visual reawakening. Gone were the matching costumes and tightly choreographed routines of the Ike and Tina revue. In their place stood a woman unfiltered and unbound, drawing on pain not as limitation, but as fuel. Songs like Better Be Good to Me and I Can't Stand the Rain weren't just hits. They were declarations of independence, each lyric echoing years of resilience. Even her performances changed. They became more rock-influenced, more personal, more raw. For Tina, success now came not through survival, but through complete self-expression. In hindsight, Private Dancer was more than a commercial victory. It was a cultural shift. Tina Turner had crossed industry lines, racial boundaries, and ageist assumptions to become one of the few black women to dominate both the pop and rock charts on her own. Her transformation wasn't just about music. It redefined what a comeback could look like. And in doing so, she became a symbol not of reinvention alone, but of ownership, of her voice, her name, and her destiny. Turner wasn't just back. She was reborn, the healing power of Erwin Bach. Tina Turner's love story with Erwin Bach began not with fireworks, but with a quiet, unassuming encounter in an airport in 1985. At the time, Bach was a German music executive assigned to welcome Tina to Dusseldorf. She was 46, still redefining her solo career and not actively seeking romance, especially not after years of trauma and betrayal. But something about Erwin's presence struck her immediately. In later interviews, Tina recalled that her heart began to race when she first met him. Still, guarded by the scars of her past, she didn't let that feeling guide her, at least not at first. Their relationship began slowly, as a friendship that gradually deepened into trust. After surviving a marriage built on fear and control, Tina approached love with caution. Could she open herself to someone new without risking the same pain again? Her fears weren't unfounded. In her memoir, she admitted she was afraid she had been too damaged to love properly. But Erwin proved different, patient and unwavering. He never pushed her beyond her comfort. Instead, he offered something she had rarely known in her personal life: emotional safety. Over time, his gentleness helped her begin to let go of the old fear that all love must come with a cost. They remained together for 27 years before Tina finally agreed to marry him in 2013. By then, they had already built a life together in Switzerland, where Tina had become a citizen. The wedding, held at their lakeside estate, was intimate and elegant, with guests, including Oprah Winfrey and Bryan Adams. But perhaps the most profound testament to their bond came in 2017, when Erwin donated one of his kidneys to Tina during her battle with kidney failure. She was deeply moved by the gesture, writing that she had been prepared to die rather than undergo dialysis. And his selflessness had given her life, literally, a second chance. Their relationship stood in stark contrast to the one that had nearly destroyed her. With Erwin, Tina experienced not just love, but healing. He never asked her to be anything other than who she was: flawed, vulnerable, and extraordinary. In her later interviews, Tina described their bond as true love, not because it was grand or dramatic, but because it was peaceful. "He showed me that I could be loved without giving up who I am," she said. In the end, it wasn't just her comeback or her fame that defined the second half of her life. It was the quiet joy of being seen, chosen, and cherished, or exactly who she was. Tina Turner as a cultural and feminist icon. Tina Turner's legacy extends far beyond music. She stands as one of the most powerful cultural and feminist symbols of the 20th and 21st centuries. Her life story, marked by abandonment, abuse, and eventual triumph, resonates deeply with women who have had to fight for their voices, their safety, and their place in the world. Turner didn't just survive domestic abuse, she redefined what survival looked like in the public eye. By choosing not to hide her trauma, she gave other women permission to confront theirs. In doing so, she reframed strength, not as the absence of pain, but as the will to rise in spite of it. Her unapologetic control over her narrative was radical for its time, particularly in an era where women, especially black women, were often expected to remain silent or submissive. In reclaiming her story through interviews, memoirs, and film, Tina became a beacon of feminist resilience. She refused to be defined by the men in her life, whether as the subordinate wife of Ike Turner or the aging performer the industry tried to dismiss. Instead, She carved out her own space on her own terms in her own voice. Feminist discourse increasingly includes Tina as a case study in autonomy, particularly in how personal agency and creative expression can coalesce into activism. In popular culture and magazines, Tina is pictured as fearless, fierce, and defiant, endlessly and throughout her approaches to life, always being referred to and celebrated from Beyoncé channeling her in Super Bowl performances to Angela Bassett capturing her on screen. Turner's reach extends over generations. Her story is taught as a tale of redemption, not merely a narrative about music's excellence. It has become a touchstone to artists, activists, and ordinary lay women alike, especially those with abuse cycles, reinventing themselves, or having public life burdens, such as ageism and the evils of racism. Even in her fashion, metal mini dresses, wild hair, and unapologetically sensual clothing, Tina defied cultural standards that specified how a woman in her 40s, 50s, or 60s should appear. What probably guarantees her cultural impact most is that today's average day evokes her memories without linking them to songs, but with survival. From her own lived experience with society, the stigma associated with abuse, and the entertainment industry, she transformed ideals in the envisioning of womanhood into something fierce, complex, and ever-changing. Even posthumously, hers remains an anthem for freedom seekers from relationships, from industries, and even from their own doubts. She broke down barriers, and she swept up the broken pieces and pranced on them in heels, inviting others to do the same. Role of Buddhism in Tina's transformation. Tina Turner's discovery of Buddhism in the 1970s marked a quiet but profound turning point in her life, one that ultimately became the spiritual backbone of her personal transformation. At the height of her despair during her abusive relationship with Ike Turner, Tina was introduced to Nichiren Buddhism and the practice of chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. At first skeptical, she began chanting out of desperation, seeking peace, clarity, or simply the strength to survive another day. What she found instead was something far deeper, a growing sense of agency. Buddhism didn't just offer solace, it gave her a structure for rebuilding her identity from the inside out. Over time, the daily ritual of chanting became more than a coping mechanism. It became a tool of liberation. Tina credited the practice with helping her break the psychological chains that had kept her trapped in cycles of fear and low self-worth. "I started to see that I didn't need to suffer," she once said in an interview. That was revolutionary. Buddhism's emphasis on self-determination and inner strength mirrored the journey she would eventually take in her music and life, one of shedding external control and reclaiming her voice. The chant became her mantra of survival, a soundtrack to her healing process long before she found global acclaim as a solo artist. Interspersed within the reconstruction of her life and professional career, Tina spoke about the Buddhist teaching that had had such an impact on her life at the time, unusual phenomenon for a celebrity of her stature in the West. She also had the freedom to speak about spirituality without dogma or shame, and was therefore able to relate more easily to a much larger audience than her own number of fans that sought meaning and strength in their lives. She released as well one spoken and musical album, Beyond, that includes the Buddhist chants of the world, combining them with spiritual traditions in 2010. But while it was pain and performance that brought her fame in those days, this was now the era of presence and peace in her life. Buddhism proved the resource that not only helped Tina to survive her past, but also transcended it. Thus, the spiritual journey of Tina Turner found its way into the hearth of public identity and brought it closer to women and survivors who considered her as a potential success map for how to heal without forgetting. Does it then make sense to say that chanting has allowed her to heal from trauma and completely rewrite the narrative of her life? For Tina, Spirituality was never about escape. It was about being that she was not looking to transcend the life story from which she hailed, but rather sought empowerment within it. In the end, it was not just Tina Turner practicing Buddhism for faith. It was also about reclaiming power, choosing self-love, and chanting her way back into her own body, her voice, and her truth. Her voice may have quieted, but something left behind is now making more noise than anyone expected. The legacy lives on. Tina Turner's passing in 2023 left the world with not only a profound sense of loss, but also a renewed urgency to honor her legacy. In the months and years following her death, a wave of tributes, retrospectives, and newly unearthed material flooded the public sphere, reaffirming her iconic status. Among the most buzzed about was the posthumous release of Hot For You Baby, a previously unreleased track that showcased Tina's raw, electrifying vocal power, untouched by time. Fans and critics alike marveled at how the song seemed to bridge her R&B roots with the rock-infused sound that had defined her later solo years. Was this track a hint of other hidden gems waiting to be discovered in the Turner vault? Beyond the music, Tina's story continues to resonate on stage. The Broadway musical Tina, the Tina Turner musical, which had opened before her death, found renewed emotional weight in its performances. Audiences wept, cheered, and connected with her journey more intimately than ever. The show, which charts her rise from nutbush to global superstardom, now functions almost like a living memorial, one that invites viewers not just to admire, but to feel. New international productions of the musical have since opened or been announced, extending her influence to new generations and cultures. Will Tina become the rare artist whose biography eclipses even her discography? Documentaries have also played a pivotal role in shaping how Tina's life is remembered. HBO's 2021 documentary, Tina, released just before her death, offered what many believe was her final word on her own legacy. In it, she expressed gratitude for her success, but a clear desire to move beyond the abuse narrative. "It wasn't a good life," she said with unflinching honesty. But the second half was. Since her death, there's been speculation about further biographical projects, including a potential film focused solely on her life post-Private Dancer, a period often overlooked in popular storytelling. Could such a film finally give full credit to the artist she became, not just the trauma she overcame? But perhaps the most lasting element of Tina's legacy lies in her symbolic role in social and cultural advocacy. Her story is now invoked not just in music history, but in conversations about domestic violence, aging in the entertainment industry, Black womanhood, and resilience. Murals, scholarship funds, social justice panels, even university courses have begun incorporating her life as a case study in empowerment and self-reinvention. Tina Turner may be gone in body, but her voice, gritty, glorious, and unrelenting, continues to echo across time, space, and disciplines. And as long as there are people needing proof that reinvention is possible, her legacy will never fade. If Tina Turner's story moved you, don't forget to like this video, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more untold stories behind the legends. And if you're ready for the next chapter, click the video on your screen now. You won't want to miss it.